The rise and rise of Gilbert and George is the most startling phenomenon of the British art scene in the 80s. The pair of living sculptures, as they describe themselves, are the first contemporary artists to have been given a show of this scale at the Hayward Gallery since Bridget Riley. They're the present holders of the Turner Prize and were prominently featured in the final room of the Great British Art Exhibition at the Royal Academy. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about their art is the way they've placed themselves in it, and that their own lives are seen as the main ingredient of their art.
To me, at least, and I suspect to the rest of the United States, there isn't the slightest doubt that they are the most famous British artists today. And whether they got the Turner Prize finally is an indication that they are, well, Britain's greatest export. But everywhere you go in Europe, whether you go to Madrid or Bordeaux or Amsterdam, everybody knows Gilbert and George. It's like the Beatles.
And in their 18th century house near Spitalfields Market, the two artists pronounce on the reasons for their success.
When we make our pictures, we make them with the viewer in mind, so that we say that the art, our art, is the friendship formed between the viewer's life and the subject in the picture.
George and Italian-born Gilbert formed their friendship at St. Martin's School of Art in the 60s, and then launched their career as living sculptures, bronzing up and posing sometimes for as long as 5 hours without moving a muscle. There were variations on bronze, of course, such as the red sculpture performed for 90 minutes to tape-recorded phrases. Through the 70s, the couple changed their formula to less physically arduous, but technically complicated photomontages. For these, they take thousands of black and white photographs and then build up and color the images on a grid pattern. Their own presence remains de rigueur in most of the pieces.
We wouldn't call it self-portrait, ever. Just the speaking artist.
We say that we are standing there, just as the viewer is standing there. It is fair to the viewer.
The current G&G show has been boogieing around the world for a year now, scoring both public and critical triumphs all over Europe and North America. But there are discordant voices, particularly here, from critics who see them as merely a pair of self-publicists.
They dress up in these sort of country squire suits. They seem terribly polite. They're sort of Tweedledum and Tweedledee, aren't they, of English art? And a lot of foreigners like that. They like them for the same reason that they like pearly queens, or they like bright red London buses. There's something comic and eccentric about them. And of course, people sometimes don't understand that underneath this comic, stylish, Danny LaRue-like facade, they hide a pair of artists who have said and done some pretty dangerous things, and they probably think that flirting with right-wing views, flag-waving, showing skinheads, using swastikas in their pictures, they probably think that they're going to annoy the life out of some granny in Tunbridge Wells. Well, you know, that isn't dangerous, perhaps, but it's downright silly, and why anybody should treat it seriously, I do not know.
We have an enormous public following in Britain, as we have in America and even in Europe. Yes.
But a public following more than a critical following?
Yes.
Here.
Oh, yes.
That is for certain.
And what is the problem, do you think, that the critics have with your work?
We don't need them. That's the big problem. We are speaking direct to the public without them in the middle.
But where exactly Gilbert and George stand in the class war or on other issues isn't always clear. Should their work be taken at face value, or is it ironic?
We speak with a language invented by ourselves. We didn't borrow from antiquity when we make our pictures. It's our own personal invention. And it's a language that speaks across class, across age, and across race, directly to people.
The huge panels of their exhibitions, always carefully planned by the artists, are obviously aimed at museums. This one is 75 feet long, but smaller works are sold privately between £10,000 and £30,000. The perennially business-suited pair are doing all right.
Yes, we like to dress like the 20th century man.
And also we rather dislike the idea of the artist as freak, that you have to have some strange whiskers or eccentric clothing. We think that's unnecessary and superior to people. We are ordinary people ourselves.
Some critics think that far from being ordinary, their work is in the great tradition of religious art. Gilbert and George tend to agree.
All of Western civilization is based on the example Christ on the cross. Every policeman, every church, every hospital, everything, schools, universities, come from that inspiration. And we as artists want to say that we acknowledge and honour that heritage. We don't want to say that we're posh, superior, educated people who don't believe in God.